Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Are you sick of watching the dross on mainstream TV? The dross documentaries, the dross soap operas, the dross news programs and the dross dramas? Well, don't throw your TV out of the window just yet, because there is something you may be able to help me with. A few weeks ago I pointed out that many of these sorts of programs are probably being used as tools of subversion and demoralisation, with the vast majority of viewers having no clue about what is going on. What do I mean by subversion? Well, I mean destroying someone's honesty or loyalty, undermining their moral integrity, planting false beliefs and prejudices in their heads which would not otherwise exist, with the intention of destabilising society and thus dumbing down the population. In a moment I'm going to show some more of a recent lecture I gave about this subject, but before that I need your help with this issue. I'm starting a Rich Planet league table of the most subversive shows on television. So if you want to suggest which programs you think are being subversive and why, please go to this link where you can post your suggestion and tell me which TV program you think is the most deviously manipulative on television. I will then compile a league table of TV shows which are considered by viewers to be the most dangerous to the mind and being used to subvert. If you need some advice on where to start, why not try Channel 5's documentaries, which are a cesspit of half-truths and use highly selective editing to present blatantly orchestrated, semi-fictional narratives as some kind of real-life documentary. I'd rather watch CAC. On today's show, I will also be screening some more of the Tony Bennett interview, who is going to be talking about police corruption. But before that, do you live in Scotland? Will you be voting on Scottish independence later this year? Just ask yourself this question. Independent of what exactly? Independent of UK powers? I would argue that it is far from clear who actually currently governs the UK. And until you can define exactly who is running the show, how can you possibly have a vote to be independent of it? In my humble opinion, somewhere near the top, but not necessarily the very top, lies the British monarchy. Mixed in with this, you might say there is US influence, there is influence from Rome and the EU, there is influence from whoever owns the Bank of England, there is influence from certain families, and undoubtedly influence from secret societies such as Freemasons. Now, supposedly below the monarchy, we have the intelligence services, who operate above the law and are therefore immensely powerful, and allegedly control vast sections of the media. Also below the monarchy is the legal system. Also below the monarchy is the army, the navy and the air force. Also below the monarchy is the Church of England, but possibly not the Church of Scotland. And also below the monarchy are our hapless puppet politicians, who in my opinion have less power than all of the above. So if a country is going to become independent of the UK, it needs to be independent of all of the above, including, most importantly, the monarchy. Independence indeed. It's like kids in a PE class picking football teams for a PE lesson when they all know in the back of their minds the schoolmaster is in charge. The real power lies outside of both the puppet Scottish Parliament and the puppet UK Parliament. We need to somehow cut the strings instead of just picking new puppets. Anyway, on with the show. Here's a recap on Soviet subversion techniques. I was listening to a talk by Brian Gerrish the other day, and he was talking about Soviet subversion techniques, how in the Soviet Union they were trying to demoralize the population so that they would become subservient to the state. And this guy Yuri Bezmenov has done lectures and produced pamphlets on the techniques. I think he's a former KGB guy. And he explains how it goes through demoralization, destabilization, crisis and normalization. So Brian Gerrish has this slide up on his screen, and what he's saying is, he's reading this Soviet subversion manual and he's saying, hang on, this is Britain today. And he went through each one, and I'm thinking, hey, there's a lot in this. So I'm just going to point out some of these Soviet subversion techniques. The first 15 to 20 years is demoralization, where they're trying to demoralize the public to make them subservient to the state. Now I think in the Soviet Union they were depriving people of material wealth in order to demoralize them. I think it's a little bit different here, because I think, as I said, they deprived people of material wealth. Here they're making people worship material wealth, lock them into consumerist materialism, and then perhaps push up levels of debt and get people demoralized that way. But let's have a look at some of these techniques. In the area of ideas, education, create permissiveness, which is a lack of rules, which means you get people coming out of education who are ignorant. They don't know what's going on. In the media, monopolize. I think we can all agree that our mainstream media is monopolized. Manipulate, discredit, focus on non-issues, and you create an uninformed myopia. Myopia meaning you're not aware of the big picture. You can't really see what's going on. In culture, create false heroes and role models. Premier League footballers, pop idol. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Structure. In law and order, focus on legislative, not moral, and create a mistrust in justice. I think a lot of people in this audience would agree there's a mistrust in justice. Now this next one, damage social relations to create less individual responsibility. I've noticed recently on mainstream documentaries and in news reports, they seem to be focusing again and again on exposure of bad behaviour. So in old people's homes they're saying, oh, they're being abused. Or the BBC website the other day, on their main website, the main news website, there was a video clip. You click on it and it's a guy kicking a wheelie bin down the street coming home from the pub. Why do we need to see that bad behaviour? And I think there's an element of monkey see, monkey do with this constant putting out of bad behaviour. There was a BBC News 24 item the other day, woman standing outside the court, and the newscaster kept going back and forwards to it while she read out these three people's crimes who supposedly had been mistreating people in an old people's home. And again and again and again she said, oh, this woman tipped an old lady out of the wheelchair. She tipped her out of the wheelchair. And they kept going, they hadn't passed sentence on these three. The point I'm making is that they were driving home repeatedly bad behaviour. And I think that, as I say, there's an element of monkey see, monkey do. And I'll give you an example. In schools, they run anti-bullying campaigns. Okay? The first thing they do on an anti-bullying campaign is they teach the children how to spot signs of bullying. So what you're doing when you do that, you're actually teaching the child how to bully. Now, I'm not saying all kids will then go and bully, but a lot of them will, or some of them will. A small percentage will. So by presenting bad behaviour all the time in our media, I think psychologically there's a small percentage of people will take on that bad behaviour. Just consider that when you're watching some of the crap that's on mainstream TV. Now, in life, this Soviet subversion manual is saying break up the family and break up society so that they create no loyalty and that the loyalty is to the state. So let's just look at society first. And let's consider that you are a brick in this wall. All these bricks are people in society. We've got a wall which is functioning. This is what they were trying to do in Soviet Russia. They were trying to fracture society so that you become dependent on the state. Now, how are you going to fracture society? Well, I think one idea would be to identify groups within society that can be separated from the rest of society and make them war with each other. Make society hate particular groups, create fractures in that wall, and then knock out groups of people in that wall. So let's just think of a group that we're going to alienate from society in order to fracture it, demoralise society, to make them dependent on corporations and the state. How are we going to do it? Let's choose a group at random. Benefit claimants, perhaps. Okay? So all the green bricks in this wall are benefit claimants. How are we going to demonise them and fracture them from the rest of us? Well, this is how they're doing it.
Julie and Vinnie Bienvenue are also experts on life on the dole.
I need a beer.
No.
I really need a beer. Yeah. I need a beer.
These newlyweds are part of Britain's record number of long-term unemployed. No work for more than 6 years. And their only hard graft is working the system.
People find it easier to live off the government because they get most of the things paid for them. And yeah, it is easy doing that. And then you got people that don't want to work and can't be asked, and they find it easy to claim benefit. And I don't know how they justify that. I am in that position, yeah. I'll hold my hands up, yeah.
At the end of the day, you'd be better off going for the VIP one because it's included.
Julie and Vinny want more. Julie gets sickness benefit, 310 quid a fortnight. All of Vinny and Julie's 9 children are living on benefits. They're the next welfare generation. Julie has to ring up the dole office to check just how much cash they've got coming in.
But can you possibly tell me how much will be going into my bank, please?
And with unexpected cash in the bank, it's time to spend.
Hopefully I can get me money out.
But they spend more on fags and their TV package than they do on food and other basics. Housing benefit is one of the largest chunks of Britain's welfare bill.
The cheeky twat.
Vinny has secured the new home they wanted in the space of just a few days.
Fucking lift up.
I'll have a coffee.
Julie hasn't had a job for 6 years. But the future's bright for Julie and Vinny in Liverpool. It's an arrangement that somehow gets them more benefits. And the cable TV man is back. So, spirits are high. Short of getting a job, life couldn't be rosier.
Right, now there's been series after series of these type of programmes, and it's been covered in mainstream newspapers as well, demonising people on benefits. Now, if you don't think there's absolute manipulation going on in that programme, just have a look at this. This is the poster that Channel 5 used to try and recruit people for this series of documentaries. It says, Channel 5, what is life really like on benefits? Channel 5 is making a new documentary series looking at what life is really like when you are on benefits. Do you struggle to survive? Are there no jobs in your hometown? Do you think the system is generous enough? It doesn't say, are you on benefits and proud, which was the title of the programme. If they'd put that on this advert, no one would have taken part, because I don't believe anyone is on benefits and proud. All right? Absolute manipulation. That couple and all the other people who are taking part in these documentaries are being duped to take part. This is Soviet subversion techniques. Now, is it effective? Well, I think it is effective. I was in a hairdresser's the other day, and they'd watched such a programme, and they were spitting poison at these people. All right? And the other hairdresser who hadn't seen the series couldn't get home to go and wait to get home to go and watch it. You go on Channel 5's website and just look at the comments from people who have watched that documentary, spitting poison at these people. And just look at this Sun headline from a week ago. It says, benefits made me 23 stone. Warning, this story will make your blood boil. This is Soviet subversion techniques on the front page of Great Britain's best-selling newspaper. Anyone need any spare toilet paper? Okay. And it affects everyone. Here's a tweet from Theo Chalmers, who says the oldest benefit scrounger in the country, still without his first job, is about to become a grandfather. And it's not just benefits. They've singled off other groups as well. Take your pick, immigrants or ethnic minorities, what have you. Now, I mentioned family as well because it says create breakup in families to create loyalty to the state. Well, if we represent families by these coloured bricks, we've got a father and a mother and children. If you're going to get your chisel into that wall and fracture society, fracture families, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it that way, make relationships fail. I don't think anyone in this audience would disagree that there are more divorces and relationship breakups than ever. And the question I would ask, is that by accident or is it by design? Ask yourself that question. I'm going to list some factors which I think maybe not cause this, but influence it. Influence the breakup of relationships, fracture society, keep us all chasing our tails. How about the benefit system? If you've got someone who's on benefits who meets someone with a job who isn't on benefits and they want to live together, they will take benefits away from the person who was on benefits. So in other words, it's rewarding people for living apart. The influence of television, in particular soap operas, like having an open sewer in your living room. Media personality worship, making people desire the lifestyle of a celebrity, thus putting pressure on their relationship. Materialism, making people worship money, thus putting pressure on a relationship. habitual use of social media. Now this is a controversial one. I happen to think that going on Facebook is a bit like going into a nightclub. Now the question is, has it been designed deliberately like that, or has Facebook, what Facebook has become, is it just an accident, or is there some kind of social engineering manipulation behind Facebook? And here's a cartoon which illustrates my point. The woman is saying to her husband, who's on his phone on Facebook, and she's saying, "Do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can pretend you're looking at me when I talk?" And, you know, who knows if someone who's had a relationship breakup because of something that's happened on Facebook. The promotion of hedonism, this idea which is promoted by a lot of mainstream TV programs, that the only reason why you were put on this planet is so that you can pursue pleasure and manufactured music. If you don't think the shit young people listen to affects their relationship, you need to do some research. Okay, now there's another way you can fracture families, obviously, and this is from an engineer's point of view. I'm just looking at it as logically as I can. You can do it that way. Take children off their natural parents. And this is not really an area that I've covered on the TV show. Other people have covered it. The UK column has exposed a lot of dodgy practices in taking children off natural parents. But as I say, it's not one of my areas of expertise, but I'm just going to list some factors which might be influencing what's going on here. Social services. Now, there are a lot of very good social workers, but I was speaking to one the other day, and they told me that the culture within social work is vastly different to what it was 30 years ago. That there's a culture of almost walking on eggshells, trying to spot signs of abuse and act on it very quickly in case to prevent things such as baby P, which is blown up in the media. Targets. Someone told me that they actually have fostering targets. I don't know if that's true. Corrupt psychiatrists and psychologists, because these are the supposed experts who will produce reports that get children removed from their natural parents. And the family courts, which are run in complete secret. So how can you have independent scrutiny and know what's going on in a court is fair if it's been done in secret? And a culture of political correctness, but feel free to add your own. Okay, so what happens if you are successful in these subversion techniques? What happens to the wall of society? Well, it ends up like that, and it ends up so it can't function as a wall. A society can't function and cannot oppose an oppressive regime. I think we've got an oppressive regime in this country, but I don't think it's being orchestrated by MPs. I think they are a punch and judy show for the consumption of the masses, and the real power lies beyond them in the civil service, in the intelligence agencies, in the monarchy. And I think that there are moves to do this, to make sure that society cannot oppose the decisions that are going on behind the scenes. Okay, let's look at our map again. And I mentioned North Africa because it appears that some of these countries down here are maybe next on the list for regime change. And the map at the bottom there, the green represents countries which are predominantly Muslim countries. We can see that all of the countries that have had regime change are Muslim. And I just want to point one thing out about Muslim countries, and that is, if you've ever been to one, you'll realise that their laws very much reflect their religious laws, and they go to mosques very regularly, and they pay very close attention to their religious laws. Right? Now, I'm not saying whether that is right or wrong, I'm just saying that they do. Right? They're very, very conscientious about following their religious law. And I think that that means that Muslim countries, the subversion techniques that I've just explained, probably would not be effective in those types of countries. They would just reject the kind of things that we are getting sucked into the West. Right? So a lot of people say that the reason why these regions have been targeted is because of oil and natural resources. I think that's probably true, but I think there's also an ideological battle going on here, so that once this area is changed, it can then be subverted. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm wanting viewers of shit TV programmes to help to create a league table of the most subversive shows on television. If you want to suggest a TV show that you think is being disgracefully manipulative, please go to this link on the internet where you can post your suggestion. And don't forget to explain why the show is subversive. I'll be waiting to read your responses. Now here's Tony Bennett talking about police corruption.
A story resurfaced in the national press, which was something I'd always followed, and I mean the background, and this has really kind of shaped my life over the last 8 years, is that in January 2006 it was announced that Michael Barrymore would appear on Celebrity Big Brother. And at this time, 2006, Stuart Lubbock had been dead for 5 years. He was killed on the 1st of April 2001, and this was quite clearly an attempt by the powers that be, by the media, by the celebrity establishment, to rehabilitate Michael Barrymore.
And just for those who don't know, he died in Michael Barrymore's house, is that right?
Well, he was killed at Michael Barrymore's mansion in Roydon near Harlow.
Right.
And one of my key reasons for being interested in the case was this happened on my doorstep here in Roydon, the next village, and the father is a Harlow resident, as I have been for the last 35 years. And every time this story was in the newspaper, I knew that the story was wrong. The idea that he just drowned in the pool was wrong. I kind of knew it instinctively. And Terry Lubbock was kind of appealing for help and what have you, and not getting anywhere. He was clearly unhappy with the story, and when Celebrity Big Brother came on, I thought I must do something. I must offer this bloke help. I didn't know quite what I could do, but obviously having a legal training and being interested in miscarriages of justice, I wrote to Terry Lubbock and said, look, I don't know, maybe I can help you with this. To cut a long story short, we met shortly afterwards. He replied to me, and then what I decided to do was, I suppose it was a form of direct action in a way. I had a quick look through the main material which Terry Lubbock had got from the inquest. So he got a huge amount of paperwork from the inquest, and it is quite clear, absolutely clear from that Barrymore was supplying drugs on that evening.
Right.
He'd never been prosecuted for it.
Right.
So what I did was I developed an application for a summons, like a private prosecution, alleging that Michael Barrymore had supplied drugs and was using his house that evening as for the consumption of drugs, which is 2 offences in one: supplying drugs and allowing your house to be used for the abuse of drugs. And I put in an application to the magistrates' court, and the court replied by organising a hearing at Epping Magistrates Court.
Right.
A gift, really gift. So I just put that out to the media, and we had a media circus outside Epping Magistrates Court here near Harlow. The media descended on this hearing, and there was one of these old judges, sort of about 70 years and old, and concerned to apply the law correctly, and he peered over his glasses and said, well, I think Mr. Bennett, I understand that Michael Barrymore is currently in the Big Brother studio, is that right? And I said, well, yes. Well, I think you need to make him aware of these proceedings. He said, what you need to do is you need to serve this summons on Michael Barrymore personally at the Big Brother studios.
Right. Right.
So when that hearing was over, we all went down in the car to the Big Brother studios, which are in Elstree in Hertfordshire.
Right.
And again, a great media circus. I was stood at the gate there trying to enter the Big Brother studios with my summons.
Right.
My summons. I had visions actually of being sort of able to walk into the Big Brother studio and actually hand it in. But of course Endemol, which was the company that was organising that, wouldn't tolerate that. Right. So I had to leave it with a security guard and what have you. But I mean the all the national media were filming this, you know,
Right.
trying to hand in this summons. So huge media coverage, and on the back of that, I then cooperated with Terry Lubbock and did a thorough forensic analysis of all the inquest material, the witness statements by the people at this so-called party, the expert reports, the pathology reports and what have you. And at the end of that period of a few months, I submitted a dossier to Essex Police saying, look, you must reinvestigate this.
Yeah.
You know, this boy wasn't drowned in a pool, he was murdered.
So what was the original coroner's verdict?
Right, the verdict that Barrymore wanted was accidental death. The verdict that was given by the jury was open verdict.
Okay. Right. And what's the conclusion in your book?
Well, I've no doubt, and it would take a long time to explain precisely why, but I've no doubt that Stuart Lubbock was murdered in a violent sexual assault, which took place about 4:30 that afternoon.
Right.
Sorry, not the afternoon, the early hours of the morning. 4:30 in the early hours of the morning. There was a rapid cover-up, a clean-up operation, and a plot devised to portray this as a drowning. And the ambulance was called eventually an hour or so later after he'd already died. And so the conclusion I come to, which is supported by 3 of the 4 pathologists, basically he was sexually assaulted, either died from asphyxiation or a heart attack, or a combination. His body was then taken to the edge of the pool, water thrown over him and some water forced down his throat to make it look like a drowning. And that was the story that they gave to the police, that those involved gave to the police, that Stuart Lubbock, the story was that he'd been playing in the pool and had been a bit high on drunken drugs and had drowned in the pool. And when you look at the evidence, the physical signs did not support a drowning, and the main reason for that is because the Stuart Lubbock's body had signs of petechiae. These are small little blood spots over his face, and that is a sign that you don't get with drowning. You get it with asphyxiation when your oxygen supply is cut off, but you don't get it with drowning. So the existence of these petechiae was fairly conclusive evidence that he did not drown. And there was a second line of evidence which suggested that he wasn't drowned, and that was the contents of the pool, because the contents of the pool were analysed and did not support that there'd been a body, there'd been human activity in that pool that night.
Right. Now, all of this is covered in your book.
Yes,
what's the title of that book?
Yeah, the book is called Not a White Getting Away with Murder.
All right.
And I wrote it with Terry Lubbock, and taking a great risk, because Barrymore is a wealthy man and he could have sued me for libel.
Right.
But he didn't, because I'd like to think the book was very carefully researched, quotes, analysis and so on, which was unarguable. And on the back of it, at the same time as the book was published, Essex Police did in fact arrest Michael Barrymore and 2 others, Justin Merritt and Jonathan Kenny, on suspicion of murder.
Right. And
Barrymore was then questioned for 36 hours at Southwood and Ferris Police Station, but he was never prosecuted. The police said in the end that there was insufficient evidence to support a prosecution.
Right. And would you agree with that?
I don't know, Richard. I don't know what the police have got.
Right.
It's quite possible that there is not sufficient evidence to actually prosecute, because obviously if something, we do know that a sexual assault happened. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. His anus suffered terrible injuries. Something was inserted into his anus that night. It might have been a bottle or it might have been a thermometer, but something was inserted, which might have been part of killing him. The pathologists suggested that his face was probably against a pillow or something like that, smothering the sounds, and asphyxiated him. So sexual assault, and his breathing capacity restricted, and that's how he lost his life. But unless you've got somebody who was there at the time, or unless you've got a confession, you cannot necessarily prove who committed that act.
So you feel there was like a pact possibly arrived at on that night to say, well, none of us are going to speak about what really happened.
Well,
do you think that's what
we know for a fact that Barrymore's manager was summoned to the scene in the early hours of the morning, presumably after Stuart was knocked senseless or unconscious or was killed. We know there was a clean-up operation, and we know that there was a plan to to pass this off as a drowning. And to this day, the media still say, when they refer to this case, they'll still say the boy who drowned in the pool. And I've completely demolished that in the book. He didn't drown in the pool at all. He was never in the pool that night. What happened was, and I demonstrate this in the book, was after the accident to Stuart Lubbock happened, Michael Barrymore then opened the swimming pool to develop the drowning theory. In other words, the pool wasn't opened at all at the beginning of the evening. There's evidence to that effect. So the whole thing was an elaborate hoax, and you know the immediate newspaper headlines were "Boy drowned in pool." You know.
So we come on to the area of police corruption, Tony. Do you think the police were corrupted, possibly in this case, to not investigate it properly? Or
well, one of the things I did as part of my work for Terry Lubbock was to initiate a formal complaint to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And as you probably know, only an extreme minority of complaints are actually investigated by the IPCC themselves. And these allegations were so serious that the IPCC, this was an IPCC-led investigation. And to cut a long story short, I think something like 6 instances of misconduct were held against a number of police officers, and most significantly they dealt around the subject of the loss of evidence, which might have been deliberate, and also the fact that Barrymore's manager was allowed to control the crime scene. And also Barrymore's manager was tasked with using the pool thermometer to say what the temperature of the pool was. Now that was quite crucial, because he said his reading allegedly was that the swimming pool temperature was quite warm. Now if that wasn't true, it would, in other words, if that was a fabrication, it would more or less prove the general point that the swimming pool had only just been opened to cover up a crime.
Now, I've got experience of one case where I believe there was a police cover-up in a murder attempt, and the detective in charge was very early on telling the victims, if they weren't happy, just make a complaint. If you're not happy with our investigation, please make a complaint. I'll give you the name of the inspector that you made a complaint to. So it was almost as if that was their way of closing the case, by getting the person to make a complaint to the IPCC. I'm actually of the mind that the IPCC is, in essence, just a cover-up mechanism.
Well, it's not just a cover-up mechanism, but what is clear from other work that I've done, not only on the Barrymore case but others, is that they are seriously ineffective and are not able to get to grips with police corruption, and the extent of police corruption I think has been revealed very much in the last year or so. But going back to the Barrymore case, we do know that Barrymore had extensive contacts in Essex with senior Essex police officers, and it's my belief, which I can't prove, it's my belief that he was helped with the investigation, which was a very ineffective investigation. Evidence was lost, not submitted. When I looked at the way it was investigated, it clearly wasn't pursued with vigour, I don't think there was ever a real intention to prosecute Barrymore or anybody else for that matter. And it was only because we made a huge song and dance about it in 2006 that there was these rearrests for murder.
Right. Now, so you said that Barrymore had connections in the police.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that they may have been established due to the connection with drugs? Or is that speculative?
I think you'll find that a number of celebrities have got useful connections with police officers.
Uh-huh.
In fact, at the relevant time, Barrymore had been in a relationship with a police officer from the Metropolitan Police. I mean, they were actually going to gay clubs together and all this sort of thing. But there's no doubt in my mind that Barrymore had contacts and his manager had contacts. So if something went wrong, like he was accused of drug abuse or selling drugs or what have you, that somebody would cover his back and sort it out for him. And if you look at his previous history, Barrymore had been caught several times for possession of drugs and using drugs in hotels and all this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The most he ever got was a caution, a police caution. It was never taken to court.
Right. So what are we talking? Are we talking cocaine?
Yes. Oh yeah. Or I mean, cocaine, amyl nitrate, Viagra. All of these things were used that night when Stuart Lubbock was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Can we come on to another case of yours, Tony? This is the Lee Borkwell case. So can you give us some background to that?
Right. Les Borkwell, the father of Lee Borkwell, was one of a number of people who approached me for help in the wake of the Michael Barrymore case, because obviously my name was coming up in the newspapers and people thought, what my case is also one of injustice, and so a number of people came to see me and said, look, will you investigate my case as well? And one of those was Les Borkwell, and it's him and that case which has opened my eyes much wider to police corruption. In short, Lee Borkwell was found dead in a concrete mixer at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 18th of July 2002, and despite the most obvious signs that this was not an accident, the family concerned where the death took place maintained that it was an accident, and the police have religiously supported that right from the word go, a tragic accident. And really this Les Borkwell for 4 or 5 years had been struggling hard to try and expose this. And it was in late 2006 that he came here to this house, and he actually met Terry Lubbock, in fact, and they had a good chat, the two of them. And Les Borkwell, in effect, said, look, will you have a look at my case? Will you investigate it? And I've spent the last 6 years, one of the main things I've been doing the last 6 years is to thoroughly investigate that. And along the way, in the same way that I helped Terry Lubbock to apply to the IPCC, I also helped Les Borkwell. And similarly, because the allegations were so grave that the police had covered up what was not an accident, which was a deliberate killing, again the IPCC decided to investigate this themselves. To cut a long story short, it took the IPCC 4 years to investigate that. And in January 2012, the IPCC found against 8 mostly senior police officers 26 separate instances of misconduct, centred around what the IPCC called a seriously flawed investigation.
Right.
There's only 2 explanations as to why an investigation like that conducted by senior officers was seriously flawed. Either they were bungling incompetents who should never have been promoted, or they were corrupt.
So is there any indication that the alleged perpetrators of that killing have got connections in the police for the Borkwell case?
Nothing that can be proved beyond doubt.
Right.
But all kinds of evidence, some of which I can't speak about at the moment, but all kinds of indications point that way, shall we say?
Right.
That there's been that this family has got connections. Perhaps I could just mention one thing, Richard, and that is that one of the remarkable things about the evening on which Lee Balker was killed is that there exists a CCTV which was seized from the house. So that evening a CCTV camera was recording events on the road that leads to those bungalows where Lee Balker was killed.
Yeah.
Now, on that video, on the CCTV, we see a known drugs courier and drugs dealer. I won't give his name, but we see him coming in a brand new black car, parking the car by the bungalow and opening it up with a case with packs of white powder in.
Right.
We then see known local drug dealers and drug users coming by car on site to buy these drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And they are people whose names are known to the police and what have you. Now, you've got to ask yourself, how can it be that a drugs deal like that, a drugs delivery like that, can be carried out so openly?
Mm-hmm.
And we do there get into the issue of police corruption, because the Les Balkwell was told by his son that by the people on this farm that they had an arrangement with corrupt officers at Grays Police Station. Mm-hmm. and that arrangement was that they would be tipped off.
Right. Well, I can elaborate a little bit on that from something that somebody told me,
Mm-hmm.
someone who has been inside and someone who was a cocaine dealer. And this person told me that the police have targets, or like league table, if you like,
Mm-hmm.
for how many arrests or convictions they get connected with certain crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to satisfy those targets, what the police will do, this is what I've been told by this person, they'll have a known drug dealer who's kind of working for them in a way, and they will that person will tip off the police after they've sold drugs to a more minor drug dealer. The police will then go and arrest. You'll say, oh, it's coming out of this pub at this time. I've just sold him these drugs. The minor drug dealer will get arrested, and they'll get a tick on the chart.
Yes.
So in effect, the more major drug dealer they're protecting, in order to get statistics to show that they're busting all of these lower levels. And that comes from a known drug dealer that's told me that.
I'm sure that goes on, and a number of other practices go on, which we could discuss. But let me just say that about 3 years ago, a major report came out. I can't remember which organisation it was now. It might have been HM Inspector of Constabulary or one of those organisations, but they reached this conclusion that the main reason why the drug trade flourished in this country was corrupt relations between major drug dealers and corrupt police officers. Mm-hmm. And that was a feature of also the Operation Tiberius, which was recently revealed in The Independent, whereby the Met Police Intelligence Unit actually documented examples of named police officers with corrupt relations with drug dealers. Mm-hmm. And it's a fact of life, I'm afraid, in this country and others, that drug dealers cannot successfully make money from drugs unless they have corrupt police officers on the inside helping them in one way or another.
I think it's who polices the police is the question that I would ask here.
I would agree with your general observation that the IPCC is worse than useless in a number of cases. I'm not necessarily saying they've been set up deliberately to smother things. It's just a hopelessly ineffective organisation. Let me just say to you that in Northern Ireland, a similar body to the IPCC was set up. Right. The main system we've got here is when you complain to the police, even though we've got an IPCC, the majority of investigations into the police are conducted by the police themselves. Right? When this body was set up in Northern Ireland many years ago, the people who ran it insisted. They said, no, we're not having any investigations investigated by the police. We are going to do it. We, the IPCC for Northern Ireland. And that was successful. They uncovered police corruption because they were entirely separate. The police were not allowed to investigate themselves. And that's still the root of the problem, really. That you know, what is the use of getting junior police officers in the professional standards departments to investigate their senior officers. It's obviously not going to work, is it?
Yeah. I mean, another case I don't know if you know much about is the Mark Duggan case.
I do, yes.
The lad who was shot.
Yes.
And that was an IPCC possible cover-up.
Well, I think did not the IPCC lie at one point in that investigation about the sequence of events?
Right.
Didn't they have to apologise, I think?
I don't know the details
of
it.
I think they did, yeah.
Right.
The Les Borquois case has opened my eyes and ears to police corruption. Mm-hmm. And what I would like to say to you is that I do believe it's one of the biggest issues in our society at the moment. It must be cut out. And in the last year or so, what have we had? We've had the police officers actively conspiring to get a cabinet minister dismissed from his post. Yeah, these police officers so powerful they could lie about what happened to Andrew Mitchell and cause him to resign. Now that's a serious matter.
The
Plebgate?
Yeah, the Plebgate thing. Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether perhaps Andrew Mitchell might be an unpleasant character. It doesn't matter whether he's Conservative or Labour. It doesn't matter what the political party is. But what we've got in that case is police officers deliberately lying and fabricating evidence and causing a cabinet minister to resign. And we can't have that in this country. We can't have that. The Hillsborough disaster, right? Quite clear that right from the top, the people in South Yorkshire Police and in another police force systematically got police to lie and amend statements and manufacture them. And it's taken a body of Hillsborough families 26 years to uncover that. Dedicated work, at their own expense and time and so on. We can't have that. We cannot have police officers who are allowed to lie, lose evidence, manufacture evidence and get away with it. And there are many other examples of how police officers have been corrupt for years and been allowed to get away with it. We must put a stop to it. I believe that Keith Vaz at the moment is heading up a House of Commons committee looking at police corruption, but it's inadequate. It's not. And I don't know how to stop it, because if we don't deal with this now, we'll end up in 20 years' time in a Mexico situation where, the drug barons virtually control the country. Yeah. Already they control the sale of drugs. They're not prosecuted. The major drugs barons, as you said earlier, they're not prosecuted. Yeah? And drugs. There's a good reason why we control drugs, cannabis and cocaine and so on. They do damage to individuals and to the community as a whole. And
right. Well, I would argue that cannabis does less damage than alcohol.
Yeah, that's another debate.
Another debate. But thanks for speaking to me today, Tony. We are going to do another interview on an entirely different subject. But thanks for your time.